Roman technology is the engineering practice which supported Roman civilization and made the expansion of Roman commerce and Roman military possible. For almost 3/4 of a millennium, the Roman Empire had one of the most advanced set of technologies of its time, some of which was lost during the turbulent eras of late antiquity and the early Middle Ages. Gradually, some of the technological feats of the Romans were rediscovered or improved upon, while others went ahead of what the Romans had done during the Middle Ages and the beginning of the modern era. Several Roman technological feats in different areas like civil engineering, construction materials, transport technology, and some inventions such as the mechanical reaper, were surprising achievements until the 19th century. The Romans achieved high levels of technology in large part because they borrowed and absorbed the culture of the pre-existing peoples of the Mediterranean basin. The energy constraint. All technology uses energy to transform the material into a desirable object or uses some form of mechanics combined with another form to make something better. The cheaper energy is, the wider the class of technologies that are considered economic. This is why technological history can be seen as a succession of ages defined by energy type, i.e., human, animal, water, peat, coal, and oil. The Romans used water power, and water mills were common throughout the empire, especially to the end of the 1st century AD. They were used for cereals milling, sawing timber and crushing ore. They exploited wood and coal for heating. There were huge reserves of wood, peat and coal in the Roman Empire, but they were all in the wrong place. Wood could be floated down rivers to the major urban centers, but otherwise it was a very poor fuel, being heavy for its caloric value. If this was improved by being processed into charcoal, it was bulky. Nor was wood ever available in any concentration. Diocletian's price edict can give us a glimpse of the economics of transporting wood. The maximum price of a wagon load of 1,200 pounds of wood was 150 d. The maximum freight charge per mile for the same wagon load was 20 d. per mile. Room heating was normally better done by charcoal braziers than hypocausts, but hypocausts did allow them to exploit any poor quality smoky fuels like straw, vine prunings and small wood locally available. Hypocausts also allowed them to generate a humid heat for their baths. The Romans worked almost all the coalfields of England that outcropped on the surface by the end of the 2nd century. But there is no evidence that this exploitation was on any scale. After c. 200 AD, the commercial heart of the empire was in Africa and the East, where the climate severely limited timber growth. There was no large coalfield on the edge of the Mediterranean. Nevertheless, in Roman Egypt, all the essential components of the much later steam engine were first assembled by the Greek mathematician and engineer Hero. With the crank and connecting rod system, all elements for constructing a steam engine, Hero's eole pile, the cylinder and piston, non-return valves, gearing, were known in Roman times. However, the eole pile was a reaction engine, inefficient as a stationary engine. The first useful steam engine did not use steam pressure at all, but followed up a scientific advance in understanding air pressure. Craft basis. Roman technology was largely based on a system of crafts, although the term engineering is used today to describe the technical feats of the Romans. The Greek words used were mechanic or machine maker or even mathematician, which had a much wider meaning than now. There were a large number of engineers employed by the army. The most famous engineer of this period was the Greek Apollodorus of Damascus. Normally each group of artisans, stonemasons, glass-blowers, surveyors, etc., within a project had its own practice of masters and apprentices, and many tried to keep their trade secrets, passing them on solely by word of mouth, a system still in use today by those who do not want to patent their inventions. Writers such as Vitruvius, Pliny the Elder and Frontinus published widely on many different technologies, and there was a corpus of manuals on basic mathematics and science such as the many books by Archimedes, Ctesibius, Heron, Euclid and so on. Not all of the manuals which were available to the Romans have survived, as lost works illustrate. Much of what is known of Roman technology comes indirectly from archaeology and from the third-hand accounts of Latin texts copied from Arabic texts, which were in turn copied from the Greek texts of scholars such as Hero of Alexandria or contemporary travelers who had observed Roman technologies in action. Writers like Pliny the Elder and Strabo had enough intellectual curiosity to make note of the inventions they saw during their travels, although their typically brief descriptions often aroused discussion as to their precise meaning. On the other hand, Pliny is perfectly clear when describing gold mining, his text in Book 33 having been confirmed by archaeology and field work at such sites as Las Medulas and Olorco. Engineering and construction. The Romans made great use of aqueducts, dams, bridges, and amphitheaters. They were also responsible for many innovations to roads, sanitation, and construction in general. Roman architecture in general was greatly influenced by the Greeks and Etruscans. Many of the columns and arches seen in Roman architecture were adopted from the Greek and Etruscan civilizations present in Italy. In the Roman Empire, cements made from pozzolanic ash, pozzolana, and an aggregate made from pumice were used to make a concrete very similar to modern Portland cement concrete. In 20s BC, the architect Vitruvius described a low water content method for mixing concrete. The Romans found out that insulated glazing improved greatly on keeping buildings warm, and this technique was used in the construction of public baths. Another truly original process which was born in the empire was the practice of glass blowing, which started in Syria and spread in about one generation in the empire. There were many types of presses to press olives. In the 1st century AD, Pliny the Elder reported the invention and subsequent general use of the new and more compact screw presses. However, the screw press was almost certainly not a Roman invention. It was first described by the Greek mathematician and engineer, Hero of Alexandria, but may have already been in use when he mentioned it in his Mechanica 3. Cranes were used for construction work and possibly to load and unload ships at their ports. Although for the latter use there is, according to the present state of knowledge, still no evidence. Most cranes were capable of lifting about 6 to 7 tons of cargo, and according to a relief shown on Trajan's column were worked by treadwheel roads. The Romans primarily built roads for their military. Their economic importance was probably also significant, although wagon traffic was often banned from the roads to preserve their military value. At its largest extent, the total length of the Roman road network was 85,000 kilometers. Way stations providing refreshments were maintained by the government at regular intervals along the roads. A separate system of changing stations for official and private couriers was also maintained. This allowed a dispatch to travel a maximum of 800 kilometers in 24 hours by using a relay of horses. The roads were constructed by digging a pit along the length of the intended course, often to bedrock. The pit was first filled with rocks, gravel or sand and then a layer of concrete. Finally they were paved with polygonal rock slabs. Roman roads are considered the most advanced roads built until the early 19th century. Bridges were constructed over waterways. The roads were resistant to floods and other environmental hazards. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the roads were still usable and used for more than 1,000 years. Most Roman cities were shaped like a square. There were 4 main roads leading the center of the city, or forum. They formed a cross shape, and each point on the edge of the cross was a gateway into the city. Connecting to these main roads were smaller roads, the streets where people lived. Aqueducts. The Romans constructed numerous aqueducts to supply water. The city of Rome itself was supplied by 11 aqueducts made of limestone. Act provided the city with over 1 million cubic meters of water each day, sufficient for 3.5 million people even in modern-day times, and with a combined length of 350 kilometers. Water inside the aqueducts depended entirely on gravity. The raised stone channels in which the water traveled were slightly slanted. The water was carried directly from mountain springs. After it had gone through the aqueduct, the water was collected in tanks and fed through pipes to fountains, toilets, etc. The main aqueducts in ancient Rome were the Aqua Claudia and the Aqua Marcia. Most aqueducts were constructed below the surface with only small portions above ground supported by arches. The longest Roman aqueduct, 178 kilometers in length, was traditionally assumed to be that which supplied the city of Carthage. The complex system built to supply Constantinople had its most distant supply drawn from over 120 kilometers away along a sinuous route of more than 336 kilometers. Roman aqueducts were built to remarkably fine tolerances, and to a technological standard that was not to be equaled until modern times. Powered entirely by gravity, they transported very large amounts of water very efficiently. Sometimes, where depressions deeper than 50 meters had to be crossed, inverted siphons were used to force water uphill. An aqueduct also supplied water for the overshot wheels at Barbgal in Roman Gaul. A complex of water mills hailed as the greatest known concentration of mechanical power in the ancient world. Bridges. Roman bridges were among the first large and lasting bridges built. They were built with stone and/or concrete and utilized the arch. Built in 142 BC, the Pons Aemilius, later named Ponte Rotto, is the oldest Roman stone bridge in Rome, Italy. The biggest Roman bridge was Trajan's Bridge over the lower Danube, constructed by Apollodorus of Damascus, which remained for over a millennium the longest bridge to have been built both in terms of overall and span length. They were most of the time at least 60 feet above the body of water. An example of temporary military bridge construction is the two Caesars Rhine bridges. Dams. They also built many dams for water collection, such as the Subiaco dams, two of which fed Ania Novus, one of the largest aqueducts of Rome. They built 72 dams in just one country, Spain, and many more are known across the empire, some of which are still in use. At one site, Montefiorado in Galicia, they appear to have built a dam across the river Sil to expose alluvial gold deposits in the bed of the river. The site is near the spectacular Roman gold mine of Las Medulas. Several earthen dams are known from Britain, including a well-preserved example from Roman Lancaster, Long Evesham, where it may have been used in industrial-scale smithing or smelting, judging by the piles of slag found at this site in northern England. Tanks for holding water are also common along aqueduct systems, and numerous examples are known from just one site, the gold mines at Dowlor Coddi in West Wales. Masonry dams were common in North Africa for providing a reliable water supply from the wadis behind many settlements. Mining. The Romans also made great use of aqueducts in their extensive mining operations across the empire. Some sites such as Las Medulas in northwest Spain having at least 7 major channels entering the minehead. Other sites such as Dowlor Coddi in South Wales was fed by at least 5 leads, all leading to reservoirs and tanks or cisterns high above the present open cast. The water was used for hydraulic mining, where streams or waves of water are released onto the hillside, first to reveal any gold-bearing ore, and then to work the ore itself. Rock debris could be sluiced away by hushing, and the water also used to douse fires created to break down the hard rock in veins, a method known as fire setting. Alluvial gold deposits could be worked and the gold extracted without needing to crush the ore. Washing tables were fitted below the tanks to collect the gold dust and any nuggets present. Vein gold needed crushing, and they probably used crushing or stamp mills worked by water wheels to comminute the hard ore before washing. Large quantities of water were also needed in deep mining to remove waste debris and power primitive machines, as well as for washing the crushed ore. Pliny the Elder provides a detailed description of gold mining in Book X 23 of his Naturalis Historia, most of which has been confirmed by archaeology. That they used water mills on a large scale elsewhere is attested by the flour mills at Barbgal in southern France, and on the Janiculum in Rome. Sanitation. The Romans were one of the first known civilizations to invent indoor plumbing. The Roman public baths, or thermae, served hygienic, social and cultural functions. The baths contained three main facilities for bathing. After undressing in the Apoditarium or changing room, Romans would proceed to the Tepidarium or warm room. In the moderate dry heat of the Tepidarium, some performed warm-up exercises and stretched while others oiled themselves or had slaves oil them. The Tepidarium's main purpose was to promote sweating to prepare for the next room, the Caldarium or hot room. The Caldarium, unlike the Tepidarium, was extremely humid and hot. Temperatures in the Caldarium could reach 40 degrees Celsius. Many contained steam baths and a cold water fountain known as the labrum. The last room was the Frigidarium or cold room, which offered a cold bath for cooling off after the Caldarium. The Romans also had flush toilets. Roman military technology. The Roman military technology ranged from personal equipment and armament to deadly siege engines. They inherited almost all ancient weapons. While heavy, intricate armor was not uncommon, the Romans perfected a relatively light, full-torso armor made of segmented plates. This segmented armor provided good protection for vital areas, but did not cover as much of the body as larica, hamata or chainmail. The larica segmentator provided better protection, but the plate bands were expensive and difficult to produce and difficult to repair in the field. Overall, chainmail was cheaper, easier to produce, cheaper and simpler to maintain, was one-size-fits-all, and was more comfortable to wear. Thus, it remained the primary form of armor even when larica segmentator was in use. The Roman cavalry saddle had four horns and was believed to have been copied from Celtic peoples. Roman siege engines such as ballistas, scorpions and onages were not unique, but the Romans were probably the first people to put ballistas on carts for better mobility on campaigns. On the battlefield, it is thought that they were used to pick off enemy leaders. There is one account of the use of artillery in battle from Tacitus, Histories 3:23. On engaging they drove back the enemy, only to be driven back themselves. For the Vitellians had concentrated their artillery on the raised road that they might have free and open ground from which to fire. Their earlier shots had been scattered and had struck the trees without injuring the enemy. A ballista of enormous size belonging to the 15th Legion began to do great harm to the Flavians' line with the huge stones that it hurled, and it would have caused wide destruction if it had not been for the splendid bravery of two soldiers, who, taking some shields from the dead, and so disguising themselves, cut the ropes and springs of the machine. Technologies developed or invented by the Romans.